get us started, who's Wendy?
Who's Wendy? I don't want to say I'm a patient first because that's definitely not how I identify. I am not my condition. I have a heart condition.
When did that start? How did we find out, and who did it start with?
I have some older pictures of family that I can share, or that you have. I've been able to go back 7 generations actually in my family to find people with this condition. So so that picture is my grandfather. This is so these are the last living relatives that I know had the condition. But like I said, it went back. Would only be 2 generations back. It's gone back 5 more beyond that. So it's been in the family for a long time. My son was diagnosed when he was 15, and my daughter was actually diagnosed at birth. So yeah, so I have been, a caretaker certainly. Through my mom's transplant, I did a lot to help with that when she was in the hospital. It didn't go well, so she was in the hospital for a long time. And then with my kids.
What are the medicine you take, and what are they supposed to kind of help you with? Is it blood pressure med?
Well, so it's not, so some of them actually were designed for blood pressure, but then there haven't been any new medications for hypertrophic cardiomyopathy in over 50 years. It was a drug that was designed for something else that then they discovered it might help with this. So for instance, one medication I'm on helps my heart squeeze more effectively. Another medication I'm on helps it relax more effectively, because with HCM, that's typically where the problem is. Your heart can't relax as much. It squeezes really hard, but then it can't relax. The first person that I saw for this condition 26 years ago had never worked with anybody with the condition. So she opened up her medical book in the appointment and was reading down the symptoms and the things that might happen to me. And she said, oh yeah, so that says sudden death is very common, blah, blah, blah. You shouldn't drive. You should never have children. And obviously it wasn't a good fit. It's really important, I think, to find somebody that you really trust and you feel that connection with. And then that relationship gets built over years, over time. And with something like HCM or DCM or LVNC, all the other cardiomyopathies, you're going to be going back to the doctor. It's not like a 1-time or 2-time and you're done sort of thing. You have to have that relationship, and it is going to grow.
When or how did you know that your son had a situation with his heart? How did you find out?
We had both of my children, we had their cord blood tested right at birth. So we knew that they had the genetic predisposition for the condition.
Today we have Wendy, who's, as I shared earlier, I met on November 2017. That was about almost a year after my implant, my LVAD implant. So probably start a little bit about, talking about Wendy's journey, who's Wendy, getting to know her, and then you're welcome to put in question in the chat, but you can also just unmute yourself and chat. It's really just a easy conversation. I met Wendy, I think via Facebook. We were both actively commenting on the post, and I remember you were asking about if it was okay on that particular page to ask for speakers and organizing your conference. And then we connected, and then eventually it turns out that we have the same doctor at the Brigham.
Right, and then you put us together in person, I think, right?
There you go. Yeah. So I think we're bound to connect. But Wendy is very active in the patient education space. She's one of the I think most, I would say, effective or efficient or productive advocates I've met, and also she's very modest about it, obviously. But she runs conferences. I'll let her get into the details, but she runs conferences. She's involved with a lot of research, including the genetic research especially within the cardiomyopathy space, which is mostly I would say the disease of the heart muscle. Today we have Wendy to talk about herself, talk about her journey with the condition, but also just life in general. So Wendy, thanks for being here. Welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
It's great. Thanks. So to get us started, who's Wendy?
Who's Wendy? So let me see. I don't want to say I'm a patient first, because that's definitely not how I identify. I am not my condition. I have a heart condition. And I think that's something, you definitely need to distinguish with people, especially when they're newly diagnosed. I think people tend to become their condition. Um, so I am a 54-year-old mother of two who lives in Plymouth, Massachusetts. I was diagnosed when I was 24 with my heart condition, which is called hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, and started getting really active, I think, in the outreach and education area around 2012. 2011, 2012. It all started when my cardiologist at the Brigham would ask me to help her teach classes at Harvard and MIT to pre-med students who were learning about the genetics of different medical conditions. And she would teach about the whole genetic side, and then she'd have me come in and the students would ask me questions to kind of understand the patient journey. And after a few years of doing that, I just essentially went into her and said, I need to do more. This, talking once a year to a group of students is terrific, but I know that there's more that needs to be done, and I want to be a part of getting that done. So that's kind of what started my journey into really working more directly with patients, with hospitals, with biopharmaceutical companies, and trying to make sure that the patient voice was front and center in everything that they did. So research projects weren't just looking at the end result, but they were really taking into consideration the impact that study might have on patients, how to put a better study together to get more patients involved, how to better teach patients about these conditions, and then helping patients to understand the results of studies, because we participate in a study, we sign all the documents, we read all the disclosures, and then we never find out what happens. And I think that was something that was really lacking for a long time. So yeah, so I've tried to kind of get my hands into all aspects of that.
Thanks so much. And that's like a full, I guess, value chain of the medical field. And I think before we dwell into that, I wanted to hear a little bit about the condition in your family. As you explained, you have it. You have this condition, and then we also know that it's a hereditary condition. So when did that start? How do we find out, and who did it start with?
Yeah, so I have some older pictures of family that I can share, or that you have, but
Yeah,
so I've
you can share
actually,
if you like. I want to make sure that
yeah, I
yeah,
don't have them on my system pulled up, but so if
I'll
you
share
can,
for you.
yeah, that's fine. But yeah, I've been able to go back 7 generations actually in my family to find people with this condition. So okay, so that picture is my grandfather. This is so these are the last living relatives that I know had the condition. But like I said, it went back. Would only be 2 generations back. It's gone back 5 more beyond that. So it's been in the family for a long time. This is my grandfather Glenn and his 4 boys. The boy in the upper left-hand corner died about, gosh, let me see. He was probably 13 in this picture. He died about 8 or 9 months after this picture was taken of sudden cardiac arrest. And then the next 2 in the picture, the gentleman or the young man in the upper right-hand corner and the one in the lower left-hand corner died about 8 years after this, within a couple of months of each other, also of sudden cardiac arrest. So yeah, so my mother, who is in another one of those older pictures, she had the condition as well. These are all oh, there we go. There's Mom and Jerry. So that's her brother Jerry. He is the one that was in that upper right-hand corner of the picture that we just saw, and he died when I was 2, I think. And then my mom had the condition. She was transplanted. She received a heart transplant in 2003. And then passed away in 2009 of complications of that heart transplant. She was the one that I think really got me interested in research and wanting to do something and not just take the condition lying down, I guess you could say, but, you know, have some control over it. And so she was the one that really started focusing in on science. She would sometimes speak at the Harvard classes, and then when it became difficult for her to do so, I started taking over. This picture, so these two gentlemen, the one on the right, Keith, he had a heart transplant. Let me see. He had his heart transplant almost 24 years ago. He passed away last summer. Again, also of complications from that, but he lived 24 years after transplant. We've had 7 heart transplants in my family, so a lot of people have been. We've had 7 people received 14 hearts in total, or so yeah. So it's a long family history of it.
It's and obviously I look at you and I see advocacy and I see like patient education, but I think there's an element of caretaker or caregiver
Oh, absolutely.
prominent.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then you're you're a caregiver, but you're also a patient and you're also a parent. That's a lot of roles.
Yeah, it's both of my kids also have the same heart condition, hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. My son was diagnosed when he was 15, and my daughter was actually diagnosed at birth. So yeah, so I have been a caretaker, certainly through my mom's transplant. I did a lot to help with that when she was in the hospital. It didn't go well, so she was in the hospital for a long time, and then with my kids. But I think being able to be an advocate and being able to really try to have as much of an impact outside of the condition as I can really helps inside the condition, and really helps in terms of me staying focused and my mental health. I mean, if I can do something, then it makes me much happier. If I feel like everything is out of my control and I'm just sitting here, then it makes it harder to deal with. So I think staying active and learning and teaching and connecting with people is really what helps me in my day-to-day, wearing all these different hats.
So I guess I just I thought of a joke and I was like, I guess meeting good folks like myself probably been helpful, but
yep.
That's for you, Meme. That's for you. But this is I think we have a lot to unpackage, but I think the first question a lot of folks might have is what are some of the thinking about the day-to-day living or thinking about the daily life, what are some of the symptoms that you notice, or that you notice at the onset, and then some of the symptoms that you are managing, I guess, regularly.
Sure. Yeah, my heart condition itself. So in me, HCM can be very different in different people. So even within a family, like my condition is fairly mild. I'm, I guess, middle of the road with it. My son has no symptoms whatsoever. My daughter has had extreme symptoms and has had a much more difficult journey. So really, even within one family, it can vary dramatically, and they're not quite sure why. So, I mean, for me, I have good days and bad days. Some days where I just, will struggle to push a grocery cart across a parking lot. Not over snow, just a flat parking lot with no groceries in it on the way into the store. But then there are other days that I'm on the treadmill and I'm working out for 30 minutes, at a quick pace. So it really depends. You really have to learn to listen to your body. And know that if you do something one day that is extreme, the next day you probably will pay the price. If you're willing to do that, then fine. But so I have to plan things around that. So if I know I'm going to have a really, really crazy day one day, then the next day is going to be a down day for me. But also the majority of the symptoms that I have had through the years are being managed well with medication. So I'm on a lot of different medication. but it's all, so far it's working, it's working fairly well. Those doses have to be adjusted sometimes. Sometimes I go down in the doses, sometimes I'm going up in others. Sometimes coming off of a drug is what's going to help, at that particular time. HCM plays by no rules whatsoever, so you really have to just be prepared to be going at that moving target at all times, and knowing that it's going to always be moving.
So it kind of requires like a continuous therapy or continuous approach to therapy. And what is that like? Like how we what are what are the medicine you take, and what are they supposed to kind of help you with? Is it blood pressure med? Is it
well, so
diuretic?
so some of them actually were designed for blood pressure, but then there haven't been any new medications for hypertrophic cardiomyopathy in over 50 years. So everything somebody with my condition was a drug that was designed for something else that then they discovered it might help with this. So for instance, one medication I'm on helps my heart squeeze more effectively. Another medication I'm on helps it relax more effectively, because with HCM, that's typically where the problem is. Your heart can't relax as much. It squeezes really hard, but then it can't relax. So I'm on other medications that help with the elasticity of the heart. You don't want the heart to become too stiff, which is something that also happens with HCM. I'm on a diuretic because it can cause symptoms of heart failure, where you're starting to hold fluids, which is going to, obviously be a problem down the line. So so I'm on a lot of different things for a lot of different things. But as I said, so far things seem to be working well for me.
And maybe we can compare it to the rest of the family. But what are some of the checkups, and how often you have to go to the hospital? What are some of those? How do you monitor it? Beyond you being mindful of your own body and things like that. What are some of those?
So I have just once a year is when I go in to see my cardiologist and kind of have the full workup. So that's an echo, an EKG, sometimes an exercise stress test, which would be on a bike typically, sometimes with O2 uptake, which is where they put a mask on your face and you have to get all your breath through that mask essentially. So you have to keep your mouth open the whole time while you're riding. It's absolutely miserable, but you've had them, I know, so they're awful. But then I have a defibrillator, an ICD pacemaker implant. And so that I go in every 6 months for an in-person appointment. And then every 6 months is an automatic through a portal that's next to my bed. That's just a little device that automatically sends in a message for what the last 3 months looked like. So those two appointments, the in-person and the virtual, I guess, appointments, end up having me seen every 3 months. So you have in person every 6, and on the opposite, 3 months later to the 6 months out, you have the other appointments where it's just the machine, just through telemetry.
So far it's been, I guess, there might have been some, we can maybe ask some scary moments, but so far it's been mostly under control. And you mentioned the AIC. Yeah, go ahead.
It's been mostly under control for me. I mean, I have had some times when my symptoms have become, more prominent. But overall, I think my journey with HCM has been certainly easier than a lot of people that have this condition, but then at the same time, probably more difficult than others. So.
And maybe take us through when was like the one of the last tough period or tough episode that you had.
Yeah, well, so this summer I was actually having some really difficult times with it, where in I would say in April and May, I was doing great. I was able to exercise. I was doing this one particular video that was a more intense cardio workout, but then you could adjust it to whatever you needed. But I would keep my heart rate up for the full 30 minutes and be, really tired afterwards. Then in a very short amount of time, I found that not only could I not do the video at all, I couldn't even get to the second exercise in the video. I was unable to walk in the grocery store. I couldn't push the grocery cart, whether it was empty or whether it was full. was having, difficulty climbing the stairs. And so it really, in a very, very short amount of time, had some really tricky situations. I just didn't know what was going on. So I went in and saw my physician at that point, and she lowered my dose of one medication, and then she actually completely took me off of another medication. So around the same time, I ended up, actually, this would be at the end of the summer when we sort of started putting all the things together. And I ended up with pneumonia. And she said, well, while you're kind of home and while you're in bed, let's take you off some of those medications, because they're going to make you feel like crap anyway when you go off of them. So let's just, if you're already in bed, let's do it now. And it's made a tremendous difference. So lowering, one and go, I went off of two. So I went off of one that was just, I was on primarily for arrhythmias. So it was called Norpace. And so I came off of that one completely. And then another one, losartan, I came off of completely. And then I went on a lower dose of another drug called atenolol, which is a calcium channel blocker. And I'm feeling a lot better with the lower doses. So I think, but I had been on all of those medications for such a long time that my blood pressure had gotten to the point where my normal blood pressure would be about 86/50. And when I would exercise, it wouldn't go up. And that was the problem, is that I needed my heart to be allowed to do what it wanted to do when I needed, more blood flow.
More circulation.
Yeah. And so, but I had been on those medications for 20 years, so my body was just at the point, I think, where it said, you know what, you need to go off of some of these things and let the heart do what it needs to do. So
some conditioning happening, and maybe some restoration over the years. You mentioned arrhythmia, which is, I guess, irregular heartbeats, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
And did your pacemaker or your AICD ever kick in? Like, did you get any of those episodes?
No. So that's kind of the crazy thing. So when I first got my first ICD, I got 25 years ago, I guess. So I got it really quite quickly after I was first diagnosed. And there was some discussion of whether or not I needed one. So my doctor at the time, I was living in Colorado, he didn't think I needed one. But because there had been so many instances of sudden death in my family, and I was having episodes of fainting, the doctors here in Boston said, no, we want her to have one. Yeah. So the doctors in Boston had followed my family for generations. So I knew them, I trusted them. So I decided to get it. But in the first year, it paced my heart once at night. When my heart rate went down below 40, but it's never fired. It's never done anything else. And I have had 5 battery changes at this point. So I'm on my fifth device.
Wow. I've had mine in, obviously the more it kicks in, the faster it goes. Also the technology is improving.
Right.
But I had mine, let's say 4.5 years ago, June 2016. And it was my mother-in-law, sorry gonna laugh, but it was a very stressful moment, because I flown in from Senegal and my symptoms came back, so I was already sick again. But I thought it was the same thing I've been through, so I thought it would be all right. But then we went through. But the first thing that the hospital did is like, well, we want to put you on the AICD. As soon as they figured out that my condition was congenital, and then we kind of isolated back and forth about the idea of taking it or not. And I remember Desiree was all the way across the world in Zanzibar with, I'm trying to sugar that up now, but like my lovely mother-in-law and the kids. And so at one point I said no, and then later I said yes. But I mean, long story short, we decided to go ahead with it, and we'll put in the device Thursday evening. So Friday afternoon, I went back home. And it turns out that in between, well, we learned that during that time I was having some irregular heartbeat, but I was having VTAC, ventricular tachycardia, and by accident we found it out. But anyway, the device we put in on a Thursday. Friday I go home, and then I come back for the follow-up the week after, and then it turns out that Sunday I had my episode that could have been fatal had I not had the AICD in. And since then, that was the only instance that thing kicked in. I mean, I didn't feel
Oh.
it, but that was the only instance. Obviously, there was some medication in between, beta blockers, controlling the heart rhythm, but it's just some of those things where it's like so much happening at one time, and
Hmm.
then your one wrong move or one
Right.
small move can change everything. And it also goes to the relationship with the doctors. Obviously, they will make the best suggestion. Nobody will really know what's going to happen,
Right.
but that relationship was important. I think now we have a bond that is stronger. They listen to me, I listen to them, and it seems like you have a very good relationship with your teams. Even going off medicine, and it seems like you talk through a lot of stuff. And how important is that to your care, and also how do you develop and sustain such a relationship with your medical team?
Right. Yeah, I mean, having a good rapport and a good feeling about your medical team is so important because you have to trust them. You can't question everything they're doing. You have to know that they're looking out for your best interests and they're doing everything that they can. And you're not just a patient. You're not just a number on a chart
Yeah.
to them. And I don't think you always find that necessarily with the first physician you see. The first person that I saw for this condition 26 years ago had never worked with anybody with a condition. So she opened up her medical book in the appointment and was reading down the symptoms and the things that might happen to me. And she said, oh yeah, so that says sudden death is very common, blah, blah, blah. You shouldn't drive. You should never have children. And obviously it wasn't a good fit.
Yeah.
so, yeah, it's really important, I think, to find somebody that you really trust and you feel that connection with. And then that relationship gets built over years, over time. And with something like HCM or DCM or LVNC, all the other cardiomyopathies, you're going to be going back to the doctor. It's not like a one time or two time and you're done sort of thing. You have to have that relationship, and it is going to grow. I think it's important for patients, if you get to a point where you're not feeling as though that doctor is working for you anymore, it's time to try to find a new one. Luckily, we're in Boston, so
Yeah.
we have, we just have the best of the medical. There are a lot of places around the country I know that don't have great HCM doctors around nearby. I think that's getting better. It's a heart disease now that's understood more than it was in the past, and more doctors are putting their eyes on it. More cardiologists know about it. The American College of Cardiology just received a huge grant to focus just on hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. So they're going to be doing a lot with it. And so I think there are going to be more doctors available who do understand the condition and can help.
This is exciting news, and I'll probably circle back on that. I just want to add that not only we have the best doctors in Boston, but we have many of them that are very cool. Like
Yep.
you can see by the shoes they wear. So
Or the ties.
the
Yep.
ties,
Yep.
Desiree
Yep.
likes
Yep.
to tease them about the shoes.
Yeah.
No, I think this is a lot of, I guess, relatable stories, and I think it makes it harder for me to ask some of the questions because I know we've been here for a long time. I mean, 2017, this is
Yeah.
fourth year now. But I think one thing I wanted to maybe segue into it is some of the advocacy work, and especially when now that you mentioned the more investment into this space, maybe we can start by highlighting some of the more recent developments, especially in terms of the potentially first medicine that we might get that is really targeting HCM,
Right.
and some of those things. So maybe we can touch on the general news update, and then we'll take it from there.
Sure, sure. Yeah, I mean, there are, like I said, there are a lot more eyes on hypertrophic cardiomyopathy right now. There are more small and large biopharmaceutical companies that are looking at expanding and coming up with new drugs for HCM. The doctors, the researchers, many of whom we work with, you and I, who are at the Brigham, have been able to teach and have learned so much more about the condition. One of the things that I work with is a registry called the SHARE registry, which it stands for the Sarcomeric Human Cardiomyopathy Registry. And it's really just a database of patient data, but it's from around the world. So it's international. So we aren't just looking at HCM patients from one country even, or one state. it's international. And with the records, the data that's in there right now, we have over 127 years of patient data, essentially, if you add it all up. And so it's a lot of really good information. And so not only are the doctors, but the pharmaceutical companies are starting to look at that, and they're realizing that there's a huge unmet need with people with these conditions, with the genetic cardiomyopathies. So so one of the new drugs that we hope will be on the market either later this year or first part of 2022 is a drug called mavacamten. And that's the first drug that specifically works with hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. And right now, the research that they've done has been primarily on people with what's called obstructed cardiomyopathy or hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, where hypertrophic or HCM is the thickening of the septum. So that's what's happening. So like for me, it's thick at the bottom and the top of my septum is fine. But some people, that thickening is at the top. And so it impedes the blood that is then leaving that part of the heart, the ventricle, to go back up into the atrium. And so that's when you're obstructed. That's what's considered to be obstructed. And this medication is actually helping with that. So it's helping not only, they're hoping that it helps actually shrink that obstruction, but what they have discovered is it helps tremendously in people's ability to exercise, in their oxygen saturation rates, and overall just how they feel. So they've been able to come down from, say, a heart failure. There are four phases of heart failure in the New York, it's NYH something,
the New York,
heart failure. Yeah. So
like classification, yeah.
Right, the classification. So you might have someone in stage 3 heart failure who's able to come down to stage 2 or stage 1 with this drug. So it's really exciting. And as I said, they're hoping to get that drug on the market, within the next year, or 6 months to a year. So I think that will help a lot of people. And then there are other pharmaceutical companies. Cytokinetics is another small company out of South San Francisco. They're working on a similar drug. The one that came up with mavacamten, the company was Myocardia, although they were recently purchased by Bristol Myers Squibb. So Bristol Myers Squibb now owns the medication. But yeah, there are more eyes on it, more research is being done on it, more pharma is getting into it. And because HCM is hugely, it's not a rare condition. At one point they thought it might be 1 in 500 people, but that's only the people that have been diagnosed. And there are so many people that don't know they have it. You hear of athletes all the time who will drop dead on the field, and a lot of the time it's HCM. And it was undiagnosed. So if you're looking at people who have the genetics for HCM but have not been diagnosed, it's probably closer to 1 in 250 to 1 in 300. So it's a really very common condition.
Yeah, that's and that was I think that was one of the lessons we learned. Obviously, when it was an athlete, dropping or falling it was very dramatic, and some of those help, I think, educate people about early diagnosis, and maybe I guess raise awareness. So we're hoping with time that will be, we won't have to go through that anymore. The new medication also, or maybe the advances in that space also, I think gives me a lot of hope. And essentially, hopefully there will be only 1 or 2 medicines that you have to take instead of like a big cocktail of
Right.
of drugs.
Right. Yeah, that would be nice.
You have to deal with side effects and things like that. So no wonder you manage that. So how, I think I forgot to ask this early on, but now, we talked about you as a caregiver, a caretaker, but then what's your support system? Who's your support system? Who takes care of you when you need it? I totally forgot to ask
people
that.
like you. You take care of me.
No, I was good, Mimi. I thought I was a good guy.
I've met so many just really incredible people in my journey with HCM. At the beginning, of course, when you're first diagnosed with something, it's the shock and it's the worst thing that could ever happen to you. But I really, at this point, I see it as a blessing in so many ways, because it's put me in contact with amazing people who are just passionate about what they do. And, I've been able to connect with a whole bunch of patients and we meet once a month. In fact, our next meeting is tonight. And it was quarterly when it was in person, and now it's monthly virtual. And so those people are my support system. Certainly my family is my support system. My dad dealt with my mom's illness during their entire marriage. They were married. They would have been celebrating the 50th anniversary 2 weeks after she passed away. So so they just missed their 50th anniversary. But so he's obviously a support system, and my family. I'm the sort of person that I don't want to burden the people in my life with how I'm feeling from day to day. But I know that there are times when I have to open my mouth and share it with my husband and say, you know what, I can't do what you want me to do, because I just don't feel like, I just can't do it today. So I let myself be supported sometimes,
Yeah.
but sometimes it's a struggle. I'm
It
not
seems like
always open
that was your growth opportunity.
Yeah.
I just had to unmute Meme, because I knew you had something to say to that one.
No, I mean, it's really, we want to help, but we do understand and respect your need for sort of, privacy, and don't want to be a burden. But I think I'll opt for you to be a burden rather than not. And I'm speaking to Wendy, not to some other person on the panel.
That's the ongoing struggle. I think we're so used to being I don't know. I think it depends on where you come from. I was telling my cousin who was going through something, and I was like, please ask for help. But this is from experience. But that was my, and I think for me, it translates everywhere, even at work. So some of those things, I feel like when you get this condition, or just like when you get challenged in life, your worst comes out. Your weaknesses, get amplified. But at the same time, it's also an opportunity to grow. I think I've done better over the years, Meme, right?
Yes,
The
yes,
grandkids help.
definitely.
The grandkids help. But yeah, this is. I think for me, the support system was really crucial. And I think it helps. They help you go. They help you focus. They help you rest. They put you back in place. Sometime, when you really do. And also, seeing other patients also help, because sometimes you can just talk between the, above the line, and so some of those things have been very useful along the way.
Right. I think knowledge is always helpful. I've always felt that more knowledge is helpful for me understanding my condition, but that goes to the next person too. So it's more helpful to my husband if I let him in and let him know what's going on, because that knowledge then he can use to do something.
Right.
I feel the same way when it comes to my kids. I want them to tell me what's going on. They have the same, outlook as I do in terms of not wanting to bother people with their conditions. But I want that information, because then I can do something. I can be active. So I know the advice I give. I'm not always great at taking it, but but I agree. I mean, I think we need to be far more open to accepting whatever kind of help a person is able to give us. So we can't always expect them to give us the exact help we need, because they're not us, they're not in our heads. But we need to be able to be open enough that we accept whatever help they're able to give at any time.
Yeah.
So that's something that, I think I'm getting better at it.
That's great. That's all you need to do, right?
Right.
Now, now I think you mentioned the kids a little bit. And how is it like to talk to kids, like parenting somebody with a condition? How do you, especially when they're getting elder and elder?
I mean, when the kids were really little, we really treated every appointment as though this was something that every kid did. We didn't say you're going into a special appointment to see a heart doctor because you have a problem with your heart. It was just something, this is just something we have to do. We have to take care of our bodies, and this is something that the doctor wants you to do to take care of your body. So that's kind of the way we treated it the whole time. I remember when the kids were little, when Connor was my son, who's going to be 21 this summer, this coming summer. But he had to have surgery when he was 6, just for a swollen lymph node. So it was nothing heart related at all, but he had to have surgery. So when my daughter was getting ready to have surgery when she was 6, hers was going to be open heart surgery. So we actually had my son, who was 8 at the time, help talk to her about surgery. So we brought him into the conversation, and we essentially said, so Sissy's going to have an operation, and you remember how you felt when you woke up, and and it was kind of uncomfortable, and then the doctors gave you a popsicle, and this is kind of how you felt, and this is what you had to do going into the hospital before the surgery, and kind of reminding him of the steps. And so when we sat down with him, he was like, it's really not bad, and it's so cool because you get a popsicle. So but I think it explained it in a level that she kind of could understand a little bit better. I mean, we've always we were very careful to never lie. So if they had a question about it, we would tell the absolute truth. This is what's going on. This is, what the doctors think or whatever. So any question was answered, but we tried to kind of bring them into that conversation at the same time. So it wasn't just us imparting information or telling them something. They were able to kind of take what they needed from it and learn from it, and then talk to each other about it. And they have just an amazing relationship, the two of them, even though they're 2.5 years apart and a boy and a girl. They're absolutely best friends, and they have been since day one. So I think that's been a huge help for the two of them with this.
Big brothers are good.
Wendy, excuse me, I have a quick question.
Yeah.
When or how did you know that your son had a situation with his heart? How did you find out?
So we had both of my children, we had their cord blood tested right at birth. So we knew that they had the genetic predisposition for the condition at birth. With my son, he was followed. They did several echoes immediately, when he was very, very young. They didn't see anything. But then he was followed because he had the gene. They saw him at Children's Hospital every year. And then during one of those appointments when he was 15 is when they finally did see the thickening. That's typically when it shows up in boys. It's when they go through that burst of, their muscle, they get bigger because your heart's a muscle. So as all your other muscles are getting bigger, at the end or in the middle of puberty, that's generally when it's going to hit as well for a teen. With my daughter, we knew that she had the actual condition before we knew she had the genetics, because the genetic tests take a few months, but she had an echo when she was just 24 hours old, and they saw the thickening in her at that point. So it was just a matter of being followed at the cardiologist's office at Children's, and them picking it up at the different times.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. We got a question about diet. Is there anything, anything particular you have to look out for, and some of the limitations?
So I mean, I eat low salt. I will take the salt that's in whatever, if I'm making tomato sauce or something like that, whatever salt is actually in the can, that you can't get rid of. But I don't generally add a lot of additional salt. So my husband complains about that all the time because he loves salt. So he's always, pouring tons of it on everything I make. But so I do eat, for the most part, try to eat as low salt as I can. And then I drink a lot of water. I mean, I go through glasses and glasses of water a day. And that's something that's really important. You have to stay hydrated with these conditions. Your heart works a lot better if you are hydrated. And if I get dehydrated, that's when I typically will have more arrhythmias and more problems. So beyond that, though, I don't really have any other dietary restrictions or dietary, those are the two primary.
And the next question I got was about sleep. I'm probably just gonna be quiet at that moment, but they wanted to know what's the impact on sleep, and so that was the question.
So I don't think my HCM necessarily has an impact on sleep. It can cause snoring, so you can end up with sleep apnea.
Yes.
HCM and sleep apnea do sometimes go together. And so that can obviously be very, very disruptive if you have that problem with hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. But yeah, but I mean, I think my husband tells me sometimes I snore, but I don't have apnea. So he doesn't, tell me I sound like I'm struggling for a breath in the night or anything like that. So, but if you have sleep apnea and it hasn't been looked at, you should have it looked at even from a cardiology perspective, because it's not necessarily just something with your nose or your throat. It could be something with your heart.
With your heart, yeah, that's very important to know. And I think the other point, the other 2 points I wanted to check is you mentioned sometimes you're good days, sometimes you're bad days. So this, and I think having a chronic condition, a long-term journey, there's gotta be a mental side of it, or maybe a spiritual side. So how are you managing that? Like in my case, I see a therapist regularly, like once a month at least. I went for a depressive period. So those can vary, but what's been your journey and how do you manage that?
Yeah, I mean, the things that I enjoy, my kind of go-to relaxation is typically going to be reading or cooking. I love to do both. If I could spend 3 or 4 days literally where from morning to night, all I'm doing is cooking something and then having my family enjoy it, that to me is just, I absolutely love that. And obviously in a good book. But the other side of it for me that really impacts my overall mental being is being able to give back. And so, I have a HCM support group that I run that I started here in Boston, and it's growing. And now we have people from California that call into it. We have people from Philadelphia that call into it. So, it was just a very small regional group. And so we have, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, and then some West Coast and some Philly. But so that is really important to me. I really, that gives me a lot in terms of my mental health. And then working with this, anytime I'm able to lend my voice, whether it's serving on a patient advisory board or, hosting one of these conferences or running a conference, they're a lot of work, but they recharge my battery like, just like nothing else can. So those are things that I really, they help me look outside myself, and I think that's important when you have something like this. You typically look very, very much inward, and it's really important to be able to look outside yourself. Yeah. So this is a conference. I think this was the one, this was Duke. So this was one I did a couple of years ago at with Duke University. And then I have others the one that Buba that you helped out in Boston, but I've done 8 of these conferences now around the country. And they're
tell us a little bit about them. What's the conference? What's about? What
Yeah,
happens?
so it's focused. It's just for patients. We do typically get a lot of physicians that will come to the conferences, but they're not like for credits. They have their educational credits. So they're really tailored to teaching patients about cardiomyopathy. Typically, the conferences focus on just the 2 primary cardiomyopathies, which is hypertrophic and dilated cardiomyopathy. But then sometimes they'll kind of touch on some of the other less frequently diagnosed cardiomyopathies as well. And it's a whole day event. It starts at 9 in the morning, usually ends around 3:30. We have plenary sessions in the morning where we'll have 5 or 6 different speakers, typically a patient speaker as well, or a patient panel. And then in the afternoons, we do breakout sessions where we'll have breakout sessions on heart anatomy. I think one picture you have of me actually holding a heart, which was in one of these sessions, which was just, so we have, that's my mom.
I don't have it here.
Oh, maybe I sent it to you in a different.
Yeah. Okay.
I thought I sent it to you in it. It must have been on a text or something like that. But anyway, so we have breakout sessions that are small group sessions. So it's 15 or so people sitting around in a circle, really asking more specific questions or learning more about something very specific. So those might be education, or exercise in the heart. It might be on the anatomy of the heart and what an hypertrophic and a dilated heart look like. It might be on the genetics of the condition. It might be on support, and finding support. We typically will have a breakout session just for the husbands and wives and the unaffected or the undiagnosed person. I don't want to say unaffected because the whole family is affected by these conditions, but for the undiagnosed person, we'll have a session just for them, so that they can also meet other people and find the support they need. So that's what these conferences
I actually
are.
have a picture. So I just have a picture of this of the one of the heart sessions from that I took. So I think it
Okay.
might be cool. Do you see
See,
here?
yep. Okay.
So
So that's one of the sessions, right?
yeah, so
And I
you get
think
to
I
see.
saw Helena, one of the people from my support group, in it. So during this session, we'll actually have a pathologist bring in hearts, and they, some of them, like one of them, I remember at one session actually had the LVAD attached to it,
Oh yeah.
which was just amazing to see it from the inside. And then you'll see, and people, put on the gloves and pass them around, and you find a few squeamish people in these who don't want to, don't want to go. So for this particular group, I always make sure that I let them know during the main session, during this, smaller session, you will see real hearts. So if you are squeamish, you might want to choose a different session to go to.
Yeah.
But it's amazing how people just get right in there and pick them up. And that particular breakout session is typically the most popular one we offer. So it's, standing room only
This was
half the
me in
time.
the. I just wanted to show a picture of us, and this was Burak.
Oh, right. He was such a big help that day.
Very big. We just couldn't wait to get out of there and go to the anchor. Literally, this is him running out to go
Oh.
to these meetings. What do you call them? What's the name of it? How do
Oh, yeah. So
people?
they're called affairs of the heart, living with, and then it's either inherited cardiomyopathy or living with hypertrophic and dilated cardiomyopathy or something along those lines. But they always have the affairs of the heart at the beginning of them. So just last month, I did my first actual virtual conference with the people at Stanford Medical out in Palo Alto. And that was really exciting. So it happened on a Tuesday evening, where these other events that are all day are usually a Saturday. So that makes it a little trickier, but obviously I don't think too many people are going to tune into their computer on a Saturday,
Yeah.
especially since everyone is living on Zoom and their computers these days. So we had the event start at 6:30 and it went until about 8:30 at night. And we were able to offer breakout sessions at the end of it. And we only offered 4, but still we were able to do that. And then we had, plenary speakers, and you were there to be our patient speaker, which was wonderful. So I'm hoping to do some more of those in the next few months. So I reached out to University of Michigan today about that. And then I'm hoping to do one with a team in Houston as well. But right now, obviously, they have other things on their mind. So
I like the some of the presentations, especially when they're directed to the patient. But I remember the first one I attended. There was I had a big revelation about exercising and heart disease cardiomyopathy, because traditionally or initially people would tell you don't exercise, don't do this. But then there was a presentation specifically about that and how to go about it. I also know that you mentioned a few times that you exercise, you try to exercise as often as you can. But I know it's probably a question when it comes to the kids, the teenagers also going to exercising. So what are some of the thinking or some of the where are we with doing exercise with the cardiomyopathy at the moment?
Yeah. So just recently, in the past 2 or 3 years, they've done some really intense studies on exercise and cardiomyopathy. One was done by a group of physicians from the University of Michigan, and it was a study where they actually took people and they had 3 different groups. One group that didn't exercise at all, one group that they put on a pretty intense exercise program, and one group that they put on kind of a moderate exercise program. And the two groups that were put on exercise programs did tremendously better by the end of the program. They felt better. Their heart function was better. You know, it really did have a very positive impact. Where, yeah, for years, because there has been a thought that exercise could induce these fatal arrhythmias because they were happening at times on the field or something like that. So it's not actually the exercise that's causing the problem. Sometimes it's the stopping, it's the ending of that exercise, or that your heart's trying to then compensate for what you just did. Or it's just a quirk, you know, a bad heartbeat that happens just that one time. But overall, if you can exercise in a safe manner, and obviously any exercise program you get into, you want to check with your doctor beforehand. You don't just want to say, oh, the doctor says I can exercise now, I'm going to go run a marathon. You know, it's always going to be little steps and getting yourself kind of to the place. So when I first started to exercise a few years ago, I actually kind of put myself on that study that the team at University of Michigan did. So I read the whole study, and then I started slow. And then, you know, like 2 weeks into it, I would increase what I was doing, which was the same thing that they were doing in the study. And I felt a lot better. Both of my kids are intensely into exercise. So they, when the gyms all closed down, it was, you know, it was just the worst thing that could have happened to the two of them. But but they do so, you know, consciously. They know what they need to do, and they know what they're allowed to do. And, you know, we've run the exercise programs by their physicians. My son is he is into weightlifting, which typically is counterindicative to something like hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. So something that when your heart is already bigger and thicker than it's supposed to be, you don't necessarily want to do an exercise. It's making your muscles bigger and thicker than they are supposed to be. But he does it in a very thoughtful manner, and has cleared those, you know, his exercise regimen with his physician. My daughter has always been into horseback riding, and that's just been a tremendous, you know, help with her. But now she also, you know, she does that, but then she also just does the treadmill and you know, weights and her own exercise as well. And that definitely has an impact on mental health. It absolutely has an
I think
impact.
that's crucial, because I mean, I just didn't. I remember my therapist at the time told me, well, even if you look at elder people, the ones that exercise more regularly tend to live longer. So she suggested that, and this was when I was first diagnosed. But obviously, you go through, you know, you have a shock, you have a diagnosis that come, and then usually the first thing from some of the doctors, they will tell you to slow down or not do too much. And I feel like not exercising at that particular moment is really can be dangerous, because at the same time you have the mental challenge to deal with, and so you don't get any lift and you know, any other opportunity to process some of these feelings. So maybe exercising could be recommended, but very, like you say, in a safe manner and within certain limits. So
well, and I think go ahead. I think too with exercise is you know, we all know that people that don't exercise at all, and you know, whether we call them couch potatoes or what, they are unhealthier. They are less healthy than people that do exercise in many ways. So if exercise helps your heart, even if you have a heart condition, you don't want to add on top of that heart condition other things like that exercise can help with. So exercise is going to help with your cholesterol and, you know, and so many other things, your blood pressure. And so you don't want to make your heart less healthy by, you know, becoming a couch potato. And I think for a long time, that's what was happening to a lot of people who are diagnosed with these conditions, is they were becoming unhealthier faster because they were told, stop moving, you know, kind of stop living, just you know, sit back and relax.
I remember one of the doctors, I mean, I saw him once or twice, but he was trying to convince me that, and I was 20, maybe 8 or something. He was trying to convince me that I have the heart. So I should picture this way. This was his picture. It's like, you should picture your heart that you have the heart of a 60 years old, so you cannot be going as fast. And 60 years old people, I know a few of them that are very, very young that do 10,000 steps or 11,000 steps a day.
Yep.
So to me, I was just like, that doesn't add up.
Right.
But I think getting the right exercise was important. So I reached out to personal trainers, and then I remember one of the things they will say is you can do weights, but try to do more reps with lighter weight or things like that. So some of those adjustments, which was important in our case, I was was trying to bulk up anyway. I just wanted to maintain the market value, that I have. So Desiree doesn't look elsewhere, but yeah, I think that was important to know to go forward. We still have a few more minutes. I know usually people get off for the hour, so we will keep recording. But I have a few more questions that probably the best part we're gonna start getting into. But I mean I think one message, what one thing I've been liking about what you do and how you do it is this important of really meaning and purpose that you adding to your journey. Obviously, you say you want to make, it's important that you give back. It's important that you do this, but it seems like if you had a choice, this is all you'll be doing anyway.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I find that very powerful, and I wanted to know how, what drives you. Not what drives you. I know what drives you, but what maintains that drive for you. Like what makes you. How do you maintain that interest? How do you maintain the challenges, the day to day, when you talk to a doctor, you don't get a response, or you're trying to get this project going, you get stuff. So how do you stay motivated? How do you
Yeah,
maintain?
well, the people that I meet always keep me motivated. And anytime I have, a new question comes up, it motivates me to work more to find the answer for that question. So yeah, so it's absolutely 100% the people that I meet along the way that keep me motivated and keep me wanting to do, what I'm doing. And there's still such a need out there. There's still so many unanswered questions. And if I can do anything to help get some of those questions answered, then, then I'm going to do it. And one job I had years ago, I remember my boss at one point called me the pit bull. He said, because once you latch onto something, you don't let it go. And, and I'm all of five, I was like, I'm 5'4", and I was like 120 pounds, and I will take that moniker, give me that name. I'm proud to carry it.
That was gonna be my testimony. I think like obviously I'll say I look up to you, but it's really even with your 5'4", but it's really amazing because you have uh, I know it's very hard for anybody to say no to you. That's just what I've noticed, including myself.
I'll fight it.
And then I just like yeah, I just don't know how you do it, but that's really impressive, and I think it motivates other people. And I think hopefully it will have more people get involved. Even
Right.
cardiologists specialize in this field,
Right.
and obviously it will translate to other things. But yeah, the pitbull is a good surname, good nickname,
Yeah.
as Odile said.
Yeah.
But
I think the more people learn about what they are dealing with and any condition that they have, the more they want to become involved in it. And I think if you only know your condition by the symptoms in the name, it's scary, and you're in a cave, but by learning about it and by letting it out of that cage and meeting other people, it brings the light into it. And then I think people tend to want to bring more light to it with other people. So if one person can learn about the condition and teach another person about that condition, and then that person learns about it and teach it, I just think it grows from there. And that's just the standard way I think things move, and education kind of moves in that direction. So yeah, you can't be closed off, and it doesn't help you, doesn't help anybody.
This is great. I think that's important, and the fact that sharing the information makes it helps it multiply, and I know oftentimes it probably come back more richer, than when you put it out there.
Right.
So at this point, I know a lot of the journey, a lot of the advocacy you've done is also involve a lot of storytelling. But how are we? how are we capturing the collective story right now? Like in terms of, obviously everybody's story is different, but there's a collective narrative that is building, that is developing. So what is there anything being done to manage that process, and how do you see, what are you seeing out there when you have that helicopter view?
Yeah, yeah. Well, so there have been not very long ago an organization called the Hypertrophic Cardiomyopathy Association actually worked with the FDA and put on a program that was just the patient voice. So for a full day, they had patient speakers speaking directly to the FDA about hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, and that was a tremendous undertaking, and people were logged in from all over the world for it. It was originally supposed to be in person. It was supposed to happen last March in person with one group, and then people could log in, but people could call in during it and share pieces of their story depending. They had it kind of broken down so that during this one session the FDA just wanted to hear about the drugs you were taking, and during this one session maybe they just want to hear about exercise, and so people were able to call in, and then a huge report went out from that. That was a published report. So I think you have blogs and things like what you were doing. You have the heartfailure.org, where you can read blogs and post blogs. Certainly a lot of social media. Facebook has a lot of groups, and the website that I manage has stories on it as well. People want to share their stories, and they want to find other people who have lived those same stories or parts of those same stories. I think that's really important. And I think there are more avenues now to do that.
That's amazing, and
So,
you're so busy, and you're so involved in a lot of things that I actually forgot about this one, heartfailure.net, which is a community that we joined last year.
yeah,
And
you got
it's
me into it. I think you started with it and then introduced me.
yeah, no, I had to. But it's a community that actually we talked to them yesterday also. But essentially, there's an organization called Health Union, and they've been having smaller group of specific conditions. And the latest one, the recent one, is heartfailure.net. They call it, where we are, patients coming. Now they have caregivers caregivers also in there. That are in the conversation, and then we obviously publish articles and share. But there's also a very active, vibrant Facebook group, and yeah, it's been quite a community that I'm really glad they reach out to me and that we're involved in. And I feel like, yeah, you add a lot of value into it. But it's amazing how you've been able to help a lot. Yeah. Yeah, I just put the link sorry, in the chat, but I'll also share that on the blog. Those are good folks. I like what they do with the articles.
Yeah,
When they
they
have
have
the
some great
graphic.
articles.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
maybe what are some of the articles you talked about? What are some of the things you talked about on that platform?
I've only written one blog for it.
Yeah.
Actually, I haven't, yeah, I haven't done as many.
But
I
you've
did.
also done some moderating and stuff like that.
Yeah, I did some moderating on the Facebook group. I think actually maybe I wrote 2 blogs. The first blog that I actually did for them was on sudden cardiac arrest. And it
Yeah.
was because oftentimes someone who has a sudden cardiac arrest, it looks like as a seizure. And my worry was that I didn't want people to see someone having what they thought was a seizure and
Yeah.
not run and get an ICD or a defibrillator, because the two can mimic each other. So sometimes when you have a sudden cardiac arrest, you have what's called agonal breathing,
Mhm.
and your muscles stiffen. So when that happens, it doesn't. When I remember very clearly, my daughter had several. And when I was in the ambulance with her, the ambulance person actually said, "Oh, it looks like she's having a seizure. She must have an undiagnosed seizure disorder." And I said, "No, she doesn't. She has hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. That's what's going on." And so my first blog for them was actually specifically about that, because I
Yeah.
just, if someone in an ambulance sees it as being a seizure and treats it as a seizure, then you're missing an opportunity where you could save a life. So that was the first blog I did for them. And honestly, I'm embarrassed to say, but I can't even remember what the second blog was.
No, it's
But
okay. I just put your chat in there, and I know this year
yeah.
we'll do a few more. I've been figuring out how to be more prolific, I guess, in posting. more. And
yeah, I have all
yeah,
sorts of ideas about what to write about, and then I never sit down to actually write about
I will
them.
find a way. One way I've been doing now, I'll find a way to organize it with you. But one way I've been doing is literally just talking to my phone, transcribing that, and then going back to that and editing and so. And
That's a good
it's
idea. That's
it's
a good
been
idea.
forcing me to really type it out there. But obviously, you want to go through it because you might end up with too many drafts, which is my challenge now. But yeah, that's that. I think there's so many examples, and you touch on a lot of the component education. So imagine if somebody's having a seizure and then sorry, somebody's having a heart attack or a heart episode and is being mistaken for a seizure. And the interesting thing is people still don't know what some of those seizures are, and
Right.
yeah, so we have a long way to go. But I wanted to know in that work, in that journey of educating people, advocating, and then having initiatives. What are some of the challenges that we think urgent challenges that you think we should address and we should be facing,
Yeah. Well, I
that you
think
are facing?
one of the biggest challenges I think is still getting people to be involved in research. I think people are still very hesitant to get involved in research trials because for so long we were never informed what happened with those trials. You know,
Yeah,
you give your blood or you give your time or you go in for a day of exercise or this or that, and then you never know what becomes of it. And I think that has there's just a lot of distrust of researchers for a lot
mhm,
of reasons, and that's one of them. So I think there has to be transparency in research. Researchers have to talk to patients as they're putting the studies together, so that they put the best study they can. They have to do a much better job of educating people about what the research is seeking to answer, what that particular study, and then let them know how it went. What
yeah,
happened? did
yeah.
did did you not find the answer? Did you find the answer you wanted? And because I think the more people are educated about research, the more people understand how it works, the more people are going to get involved, and the faster all of this will work. We'll
Yeah.
have more medications, we'll have more doctors that are going to know about it, but it's going to take a lot of work to get there.
This this is
But
great
I
as you're
think it's
saying that.
really
I
important.
think because as a person of I was gonna say person of color, which I don't usually use the term, but as a black person, it's that distrust has been there with it, with research and
Right.
with the medical community, and it's also that translates into the lack of representation. But then,
Right.
to your point, makes everything less ineffective. So that, yeah, translating, communicating that back, and then being transparent is definitely would be hopefully helpful. And this is maybe a bit of, it might not be the right place, but I know you've been helping me review the concept that we're working on for the community-based
Mm-hmm.
health program. And then one big component that we're going to introduce there is not just, well, research, a public health education, public health, but also a lot of research in terms of data, collecting the data, monitoring the data, helping the data speak to the patient first, and obviously,
Right.
sharing, referring that to the medical world or the doctors or the practitioners for their research, but also for their own work. But I think hopefully that will be a platform to help us. Because the one thing I think, and this is leading to my last point, but one thing I noticed is that, and between what the main difference between where I come from, Mali and Senegal, or Africa in general, and here is the approach to care. Here it's much more private. It's like it's private to the point that it's even individualized. Whereas
Mm-hmm.
usually at home, the way we would look at it is it's not just one person. It's like a community or a household at least. So I'm hoping that that will change especially with COVID now, because when we explain that there's community infections or community infection of a virus, or communal infection of a virus, it's something that is harder to explain when the culture doesn't necessarily support it.
Right.
But I wanted to maybe hear, yeah, your thoughts on that in terms of um, what are some if that's your own assessment, or you agree with that, and how we can maybe address that?
Right. No, I think absolutely. I think community, you have to find your community. You have to feel as though you're a part of the community. And I've been fortunate enough to be able to kind of start building a community of HCM, with what I'm doing. Um but but in order to help the community, and the community data, you have to understand how that's going to help you, not just how it's going to help the doctors. Oh, I'm helping, by giving this, I'm helping doctors discover something. No, how is it going to help me specifically and my family? How is
Yeah,
it going to help my children? How is it going to help my grandchildren? And
yeah,
that's where the community comes in, because the doctors are never going to tell us that.
yeah,
They don't have the time to bring us, to create a family for us, and to teach us how important it is to support each other, because if you're supporting each other, sooner or later it's going to come back to you. I mean,
yeah,
that's the way it works.
yeah,
And so I think it's, the effort that you're putting forward, I think, is so necessary. And it all comes back to teaching people to advocate for themselves, teaching
yeah,
people the importance of that, and how that then grows and helps make a much stronger community bond, because then you're advocating for your neighbor as well. If
yes,
you're really advocating for yourself, you're advocating for 100 people that you don't know,
yes.
at the same time.
Yeah, and I know for sure you've definitely been advocating for hundreds or maybe thousands of people. I can only imagine, because your events have about 200 people, 200 people at least, and you've had 8 of those, and you've been talking to so many people. So
Yep.
and I just hope that impact continue to multiply, and I think we're already seeing the results of it. But I just had to put it out there. Um, yeah, Sean, I think you'll have to speak to this. I probably yeah, you say you have an SICD. Is
Shonda,
this,
so he has the one in the side,
yeah,
Yeah, it's a sub.
subcutaneous.
It's called a sub Q.
Yep.
yeah,
I was the first person in the state of Nevada to get it, and
Wow.
I was one of 300 in the world to get it when it came out in 2014 with
Yep.
yeah,
Boston Scientific.
Yep.
Very lucky, but I was curious to see if anybody else
Yeah, I know a couple
has
people
those
that
sub Q.
have SCICDs.
Yeah, it's
Yeah, because I think they're far more standard now. They work really well for a certain subgroup of people. I mean, like with my situation, I really did need one. I needed the standard, but with some people, the SCICD works much better, I think, for them. So
yeah,
I'm glad that they're being used more than they were before.
Yeah, I think there's 79,000 that have been implanted since 2014.
Hmm.
It is sort of the future of
Right.
the ICD category because it causes less rejection
Right.
to the body. And so I had a diagnosed blood clotting disorder and anemia. So my body rejected the original ICD,
Okay.
um,
honestly,
which was yeah, very, very destructive, and
Hmm.
so it destroyed the IR subclavian and the anomaly. But yeah, the SICD is a very important. It's an incredible device. But yeah, I was curious to know
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, I've worked at some of my conferences. We've had Boston Scientific help sponsor, and they'll bring, the traditional ICD, and they'll bring SICDs as well. And they're so small, and I mean, they're just, yeah. I wish that one of those would work on me. And then when my daughter had to have her ICD placed, she had to have a traditional as well. I wish that she had been able to have an SICD, just because of it would have been a little hidden, because she's very, very petite framed wise. But she needed the standard ICD as well when she got hers. But although it was in 2014, so they were pretty new. Like you
yeah.
said, they were.
I
It
think
was
I only
very.
saw pictures of it. Yeah, I only see pictures of it, and it was fairly new at the time. But this was
Hmm.
2 years after that, 2016, 2000, yeah, 2016. Carmen made a comment about a 22 years old who didn't want who has one, and he didn't want to mess with his look.
Right, because they're more hidden.
Yeah, I wonder how how Sean is feeling about the looks, and I'd love to hear more from Carmen about that.
My cousin's son got an SICD at UCLA. Very good looking guy, six pack, all the works, nice chest. And he kids around and says, I didn't want to mess up my, I forget what he calls it. He has a name for it. So I got mine in the side. It seems to me, knowing him, and then I have other cousin from the same family who has three sons that have, one of them has an SICD, the other two have a normal one. They were very young when they got theirs. And I was wondering if they're starting to use those in younger adults rather than older people. I guess we don't care about what our body looks like when you get old. Maybe a young person might care about having a lump on their chest or a scar. They go shirtless or a low cut dress or whatever. I don't know if they're any better. I have no idea. I guess.
Yeah. I think it really depends.
Sean would know because he has one for real.
Yeah. I think it depends on really what the best device is for that particular person's situation, more than the device that's going to be more hidden necessarily. So, I mean, I think if a person had the choice where the doctor said you could really either go either way and it wouldn't make a difference, then yeah, the person might choose to have something like the SICD as opposed to the one in the chest. But in some situations, I think they still, because the SICD is still a newer piece of machinery, essentially, the standard still works better in some situations for some people. My daughter didn't have the choice. She needed to have the standardist.
Sean, how's your look? How did this affect your look?
It is it's interesting because I think I'm one of the few people that have had both the AICD and then the SICD. And as Wendy is saying, and with everyone else, it was I was one of the very first few to be documented in that state. I lived with the AICD, and I was a triathlete before, and so right when I first got it, my body was much different. The AICD was certainly uncomfortable. I mean, it was in the chest, so it looked like a pack of cigarettes coming out of your left side. So wearing a t-shirt or something thinner was always noticeable. And then the SICD for me also was a much harder challenge, even though that it's on the side, which attaches to the rib cage. In some cases, as Wendy said, it can be smaller, but it's been bigger for me just because of the pocket size, and that it also, my body has rejection issues. And so the sub-Q runs through the body, which is more of an L shape from the left rib cage that runs to the center of your sternum and runs up to the base of right below your throat, where there's a double shock potential, and it is the most powerful device ever put into a body. So I never had the AIC fire, the ICD, but the 20 times that the SICD has gone off has definitely been a very, very, it's an experience that is unlike anything else, because it's about 2.5 times the power, since it is subcutaneous. So it has to go through more bone and muscle, to reach there. Only about 127 doctors are authorized between California and Nevada to actually perform this type of surgery. So as Wendy was saying too, the more physicians and the cardiac community is more apt with the ICD, since most of those doctors have been trained on it. Not as many have been on the SICD. And while this is the traditional implant picture, there's been a few doctors who have, or the ability to implant that under the trapezius or under muscle so that it doesn't stick out. It is quite large on my left side. If I lift up my arm, you know, it's kind of like a baseball. It's about 2.5 times larger than my ICD, just because the second implant in there has caused so much infection. And so it swelled bigger and it's holding more fluid. But you know, I would say both are tough to deal with, just because, you know, I've had 26 heart and heart-related surgeries, and I also have the collapsing of the left side of my vascular. So there's pre-mounted stent systems, and so all of that kind of adds a little bit more of a problem. You know, when there's so much scar tissue and things, but you know, the technology is getting better, and like you know, Wendy and Buba, you know, with the LVADs and with the ICDs, this is really great technology. I always try to tell people, don't question your doctor. If you're on this path, you get it, because all of mine would have been fatal.
Yeah.
Have
you named your ICD?
So it's
I have a lot of friends that have named theirs, like Sparky, or you know.
You know, I do. So all of them had a pet name. You know, some of my friends had named it, you know, first for me, like, you know, what is that thing? And so for me, I called it my AMLID, which was my life-saving device. So it's more of an ML, you know, SD. So like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, you know, this is my hero.
Right.
So it's kind of the hero tag. But it does. It's funny you mentioned that. I joke with my doctors and my medical teams about it. You know, like, who are we seeing me today? Or are we seeing my device today?
Right. Exactly.
Yes, some of them only talk to one part. You know, they interrogate the device, and you have to sit down. And this is amazing, Sean. I think we have to, you have to come back and tell us more about that. So I'm definitely making a note, and if I can't convince you, I'll get Wendy to ask you to come share that.
Oh no, I would love.
Pleasure.
Hey, I'm just honored to be a part of the group here, and look and watching Buba and Wendy and there's so many you know, great people out there, the advocates, and then trying to help patients. I'm on the same page as Wendy. You know, I want to help save lives, and even though right now things are really rough with my medical journey, I'm hoping to come out the other side.
Yeah, we will definitely. It means a lot for me to have you here, and then you've been on all the calls, and all your phone call. We're definitely gonna be, you know, making sure that this community thrives. I just wanted to highlight to recognize Tina, who hasn't been on video. I don't know why, but Tina was on the last call. We're coming close to the time, and I really wanted you know, to thank you, Wendy, for this chat. And I think, you know, it's the beginning of many conversations. It's probably becoming a cliche, but heart patients have so much to say, and many of them are cool people. So there's gonna be a part 2.
Absolutely.
We definitely have to plan that. But yeah, I wanted to kind of, you know, let you have the closing words, let you have the last words. But one thing I probably would like you to touch on is, how do we support this education and advocacy or research in general? But you let us know what you want us to part with.
Yeah, thank you. No, I really appreciate you having me on today and giving me the voice to share my voice. I think it's really important that we just continue to advocate for ourselves. We continue to ask the doctors the tough questions. Don't, if you're unhappy with an answer that they give you, fight for the right answer and continue to talk to them and to educate yourself, through what the doctors are telling you, and then find, other sources to educate yourself out there. There are a lot of good sources. Don't go on and just Google how long will I live with hypertrophic cardiomyopathy or something like that, because Dr. Google is very bad at those sorts of things. But I think if you want to find real resources out there and ask real questions, teach yourself, learn more, meet people, and then connect with those people, and then stay connected with those people, and start building your community, because then we're all taking care of each other.
Thank you so much. This is this is the words, and we'll take care of each other. I do want to thank everyone for joining, and we're gonna do this again. Wendy, all the best to the family.
Yes,
I haven't seen them in a while, but I know they're even more grown than last time we saw them.
Yep.
I think when I put a goodbye picture of the you and your lovely family, and how did I close that? Yeah, there we go. There's one.
Well said, everybody.
Didn't go through, but thank you so much, everyone. And then if you I'll share a note later, and we'll have Wendy. If you want to contact Wendy, she's always available.
Yep.
And this is Wendy.
That's my family.
That's the lovely
family.
Selfie
with someone taking a selfie in the background. We got a selfie
awesome.
Bomber in that picture.
That's 2020 and 2021. Thank you so much, everyone.
Yep, thank you, everybody.
You guys take care.
Bye-bye. Thanks, Booba.